Hi, this is Amanda.
Aya.
And Karen, and we are co-admins at the SLPs of Color.
We're an inclusive and intersectional community for SLPs, audiologists, and students.
Today we are interviewing Lucretia Whitmore-Govers, a Black SLP based in Oakland, California.
Lucretia's pronouns are she, her.
Listen as Lucretia shares her experience growing up in the East Bay area in California and her experience following a non-traditional route to speech-language pathology.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you all. My name is Lucretia, and I have been an SLP for about eight years. I still feel pretty new at it, even though I'm told by some of the people in my district that I'm old school. But it still feels like I'm still pretty new at it, and I hope that's because I hope to never stop learning about what we're doing in our field. So let's see. I have been a member of SLP of Color or affiliated with SLPs of Color for a year, or maybe a little more, but 2 years. 2 years.
Wow.
The time goes fast. And so, yeah, it's just been really great meeting all of the different people who are so passionate about this field, who look like me. It's really nice to see all of your faces and know that you guys are here for our students and our parents and our coworkers and our friends, our family. So I'm really happy to see you all, and congratulations on having your baby, and also congratulations to all of you for graduating. So because you're all recent grads, so it's a great accomplishment. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and so I kind of wanted to go into a little bit about your background. So can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I'm a California native. I was born in San Francisco a million years ago, actually in the 70s. I was born in San Francisco in the 70s, and my family moved to Berkeley also in the 70s. And so I grew up in Berkeley, which I don't know if you are familiar with Berkeley, California, but it's very liberal, or maybe not as much as it used to be. But back then there were a lot of hippies and communal living and those kinds of things. And but with that, there was also the Black Panther movement and lots of other ways to kind of get involved with all of the political and social kind of, I hate to use the word unrest, but it kind of felt that way back then. That was happening in the late 60s and early 70s. So, but it was good. I went to public schools, and back in the 70s, early 80s, we were bused. So because Berkeley was kind of segregated, and I know when you think of cities in California and certain places, you don't think that they are, but they were. The Black and brown people lived in the flatlands, and the more affluent people who weren't necessarily Black and brown lived in the hills. And so what the city or the school district decided to do to kind of integrate us was, for the first 3 years of our schooling, we went to schools that weren't in our neighborhood. So I was bused up to the hills, and the kids in the hills were bused down to the flatlands for school. So it was interesting, to see the different neighborhoods. The neighborhoods that were very different than the one that I lived in, which was somewhat integrated because there were a lot of communes in my neighborhood. So that was it was nice. It was good, to kind of see how other people lived, and to make friends with people I wouldn't have necessarily interacted with on a daily basis. So that was good. by the time I got to high school, we just went to middle school. We went to our neighborhood middle school, which was, and I already knew people from all over the city at that point because we were bused all over the city. So that was nice. And the same with high school. I went to Berkeley High School, and I went to high school until I was old enough to take the high school exit exam, because I was not a fan of high school. So I was not a fan of high school, and I thought I knew it all. And with the exit exam, you whatever the bare minimum is that you need to learn before you graduate, if you can pass that exam, then you can leave. And so I did that when I was in my junior year. I took the exit exam because I thought I didn't have anything else to learn. And looking back on it, of course, I'm like, the bare minimum is never enough. Right. And so that was a decision I wish that I hadn't made, but, it was fine. I did. I made it. And after high school, I worked. I worked for several jobs. And then I decided to go to community college while I worked. And yay. I think community college is a great idea for anyone, right? And so it took me a long time to get through community college because I did work. I had to work, right? My mom was like, if you're not going to school, you have to get a job. So I worked, and I had several jobs. And at one point I was working a split shift. So I would go to work early in the morning, and then I would go to school, and then I would go back to work.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were on a grind.
I was. I had to live.
Yeah.
And then I transferred to San Francisco State University. And yay. And at that point, I got an undergrad degree in sociology and liberal studies. So yeah, and looking back on that, and with a minor in education, and looking back on that, I'm like, what am I going to do with this degree, right? So being a speech pathologist is like a third or fourth, and maybe even a fifth career for me. It's not something that I just knew. I don't know, you all look really young, but it's not something that I just knew, like you all, that you wanted to do as soon as you were done with college. It was a kind of a long road for me to get here. So should I keep going? Because there's more. Did you have more?
You can go ahead.
You have more questions? Okay. I don't want to take up all of them. I don't want to do all the talking.
Oh no, absolutely. This is your interview for everyone to get to know you. So continue on however you please.
Okay. So when I graduated from San Francisco State, I immediately got a job at a charter school teaching second grade. And at the same time, I was pregnant with my first son, or my first child. It's my son. And I hated teaching. I hated it. I hated it. I mean, I love working with kids. I work with kids now. I work for a school district, but teaching, just being in the classroom, teaching this kind of the same thing all the time was not, it wasn't what I felt was good for me. And I didn't feel like I was good at it. And so I knew that wasn't fair to the kids, with not having my heart in it, and something that I didn't really feel like I could do it, but it would be kind of like the same with how I left school, it would have been just like the bare minimum, and that wasn't fair to the kids, and it wasn't fair for me, right? Because it was my job. And so I left, and I stayed home with my son for a year. I was lucky enough to be able to do that. And then what did I do? Oh, and then I taught childbirth classes. I went into teaching childbirth classes at Kaiser. I did that for 7 years. So it was part-time. I taught childbirth classes at Kaiser. Again, I got into that whole, I have to have more than one job. So I had a little kid. I was teaching childbirth classes. I got pregnant again, and I had another kid while I was still teaching childbirth classes. And then while I had two kids, teaching classes on the weekend mostly at that point. And then I also got a job as a research assistant at UC Berkeley. So I was like it was a lot. It was a lot. But at the same time, I was able to kind of work my schedule so that I was able to stay home with my kids, which was really nice, right? For me, it was really nice. And then when my son was, I don't even think, maybe it's just over one, not quite 1.5, I realized that he wasn't talking and he should have been talking by that point. And so, I talked to, my family, and they're like, "Oh, leave that boy alone. He'll be okay." He's just slow, and, he's a slow talker. He'll start talking. And there was just something in me. It was like, this is not right. When I was young and I was a new parent, I didn't know. And so I don't remember who told me, but someone told me about an organization called the Regional Center. And I don't know if you guys have heard of the Regional Center, but they provide services for people with disabilities, including assessments. And it's a self-referred organization. So I called and I said, I want, these are my concerns, and I would like my son tested. And so he saw a speech pathologist, and he had articulation disorder, expressive language disorder. He had low tone in his mouth. And so we had speech therapy or he had speech therapy, I should say. And it was, I'd never heard of a speech pathologist or speech therapy before that. I think probably like a lot of us hadn't. And I took him to speech therapy twice a week for 2 years. I know, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And if you talk to him now, you would never know, right? Obviously, we had great speech therapists. But I worked with him a lot too when we were at home. And one of his speech therapists said to me, you should become a speech therapist. I think you'd be good at this. And I just never really, I was like, oh, whatever, and I didn't think about it. And then a few years later, there was a woman whose kids went to the same preschool that my kids went to. And she said she was in the program, in a speech therapy program. And she said, "Oh, I think you should do this too. I think you would like it. And I think it would be good for you." And I was like, I can't go to grad school. I can't do that. I can't do it. I have too much going on. And she was like, "I really think you should do it." And I said, "Well, I'll think about it." And then maybe like a couple months later, there was another parent at my kid's school, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to school to be a speech pathologist." She was like, "I think you should do it." So I was like, "Okay, fine, I'll check." That's 3 people. So I'm going to look into it. And so I did, and I enrolled in a program at Cal State East Bay, which it used to be Cal State Hayward. It's now Cal State East Bay. And because, my first undergrad degree was in a field that didn't really have anything to do with speech, I had to take a bunch of leveling classes. So I did that, and it was good. The program was kind of interesting, but we can talk about that later. But I feel like I've done so much talking. Do you guys have any questions or anything? Should I keep going? Or?
Yeah, that was,
sorry, I have a question. So how was the leveling, I guess, process for you? Did you take them at Cal State East Bay, or did you take them at a local community college, or?
Yeah. So Cal State East Bay, I took them at Cal State East Bay. They had an undergrad and a grad program there, and their leveling courses were part of the undergrad program. So I went back and did a second undergrad degree, which I wasn't. I was hoping that I'd be able to go straight into grad school, but it took, I think a year and a half, 2 years, a year and a half. So. Anything else?
Do you have any advice for any students to be that are in the same position or were in the same position as you were, where you fell upon the field and you wanted to pursue this, so you had to complete leveling courses if you weren't going to follow for, I'm assuming this would just be the post-bacc, right?
Yeah, it was post-bacc. No, it's post-bacc, yeah. Wow, any advice? Well, I think whatever advice I would have would be the same as most people. Like a lot of people have to do leveling courses, right? But I guess my advice would be, to kind of take those leveling courses kind of seriously. I think that they might move a little differently than it felt to me like everything was just kind of jammed in, like I didn't have the luxury of taking the classes at a slower pace, and I don't know how some of the other programs are, but you're in a cohort, right? And if you don't do well in one class, it's going to set you back for a full year because everything moves in a cohort. At least that's the way it was at Cal State East Bay. And so you have to really take those classes, really seriously, because they're not always offered more than once in a year. So, I would say I think it's worth it to take the classes. I can't think of anything else right now.
Yeah, so following after you finished those leveling courses, did you apply during that process? Because I know you said it was a year and a half. Did you apply maybe like a year in for that following semester to start, or do you have any leeway between that?
Yeah. So, the way, so I applied, I think a year and a half in, and I applied at the same time as everyone else in my cohort. And it was interesting because, and I've heard this from lots of other SLPs of color, where there wasn't necessarily a lot of support for Black and Brown people in our field. As a matter of fact, I felt like I was discouraged from pursuing a master's. The undergrad degree was fine, right? It was great. But once I decided that I wanted to, once I went to apply for my master's degree, things changed a little bit. I mean, I had already felt a little bit kind of on the outside of the rest of the people in my cohort, and it wasn't that people weren't, like, the other students weren't nice, but I wasn't necessarily invited to the study groups. I wasn't invited to sit with anybody for lunch, and those kinds of things. Which can make things a little more difficult, especially with the study groups.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And I thought, well, I'm the only Black person in my program, only one. It was just me out of 60 people, just me. I was also the oldest, right? Because this was my, practically, I had 3 or 4 other jobs. And everyone was really young. I was the oldest. And there was one man in the program, and he also felt a little bit kind of left out. But, I felt like there were kind of 2 things that were kind of holding me back from really having that support system that everyone else had. So my age and my color. And, but I did work, I still worked hard. And, you know, even though I wasn't necessarily part of any of the study groups or any of the other bonding activities that were happening between the other people in the cohort, I didn't really feel, I don't know how to explain it. I don't think I don't think it was done purposely by by anyone. It just wasn't, I don't know how to explain it. So
no, I completely understand what you're talking about. I think
yeah.
that's a common theme for students of color in any programs, and it's specifically in speech pathology. It's that no one's doing that maliciously. It's just you
Right.
feel like an outsider.
Right. Yeah. And so, but what I felt was done maliciously was the person who taught many of the courses was also my counselor. And he told me, when I went to apply for the grad program, he said, I think you should look into something else. And I know, I know. And I said, well, I feel good about this. You know, my grades are not bad. You know, I feel like I'm doing great. You know, my grades were good actually. I feel like I'm doing a good job. I feel like the hands-on experience that I have had, I feel like I'm doing really good at it. I haven't gotten any kind of negative feedback, you know, and I said, I feel like this is right for me. And he said, yeah, but I don't think you're right for it. Yeah. Yeah.
He said that, and he was your counselor, and he
He's
said
my
that.
counselor. Yeah. Yeah. And so I said, you know, and that just in my brain, I was like, oh, it's on. You know, there's no way that I am going to let anybody tell me, you know, that that I'm not right for this. This is not, this is my life, and I'm going to do what I wanted to do. So I used it as fuel, right? I applied to the program and I didn't get in at Cal State East Bay. It was the only program I applied to. And I talked to, also, I just want to say, in that year, there were only 10 spots open in the grad program, and there were more than 260 people who applied, right? But still, right? I think that's not unusual. But I didn't get in, and I was a little bit hurt because I had just spent, a year and a half, 2 years going through this program, and then I didn't get in. And I was walking down the hallway one day, and the person who was the department head pulled me aside and apologized to me. And she said, I'm sorry you didn't get in. And she said, most of us, wanted you to get in, but there was one person who felt like, on the committee who felt like, maybe, this wasn't best for you. And so we just decided to to go with someone else.
Also, to clarify, CSU East Bay is making an effort to work on diversity and inclusion, and they're currently open to feedback from current and past students. Lucretia has actually previously mentored one of their students in the past school year.
And that was fine. So she wrote me a glowing letter of recommendation and told me where to apply. And so I applied to CSUN. And they had a hybrid program. I don't know if you guys are familiar with CSUN's hybrid program. So part of the program is online and part of it is in person. So the classes were all online, but the clinical work was all done in person. And so I took the GRE, and I got lots of people from UC Berkeley and from CSUN is California State University, Northridge.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. I was just actually wondering. I was thinking, is that the one that's in New York? But I realized,
no, I'm sorry.
They have a fully online program now too.
Which one?
CSUN has the fully online program as well.
Yeah.
At this point in time, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. It's good to hear. So yeah, I took the GRE and I got, letters of recommendations from all the people I knew at Kaiser and at UC Berkeley and from the department head at Cal State East Bay. And so I got in there and I went through the program, and it was good. I made a lot of lifelong friendships, that there, which was great and is great. I still talk to these people often, and yeah, so it's been good.
So you've told us a little bit about your college experience prior to CSUN, and you kind of shared a little bit about, how you made really great friendships while at CSUN. How was your experience there in terms of clinicals as a student? And then I guess you can go into your CF experience and how that process went for you as well, if you don't mind sharing about that.
So for clinicals, it was all done here in my community. So there's a pretty big company here that I don't know. I don't know if I should say which company it is or not, but there's a pretty big company here that they pretty much took me under their wings, and it happened to be the same company that my son had his speech therapy with. So when I needed someone to be my clinical supervisor, I just automatically reached out to them, and they were happy to do it. And so
Lucretia completed her clinical fellowship with the speech pathology group.
So I was able to do my clinical work in a school, in a private clinic. I did oh God, was it a school, a therapeutic day school for preschoolers, a middle school, elementary school, and then for my adult externship, I did. I worked at this place called, I did it through, oh God, I'm trying to remember the name, Services for Brain Injuries. And it was through the Department of Rehab. And that particular placement, the Cal State Northridge found that placement for me, but the other ones I found on my own.
Do you feel like you were supported more in this setting, I guess, from faculty and your classmates compared to when you did your post-bacc?
Yes, definitely. There's definitely more support. And I think, especially from the faculty, with the program being hybrid, with part of it being online, there had to be that extra support. I couldn't go in for office hours, I couldn't talk face to face with my instructors, every day when I needed to. But there was a lot of support from the staff and also from my classmates, and there was still only two black people in our cohort of I can't remember how many people it was, but there were only two of us, and then there were maybe 10 people of color in the whole cohort. There weren't a lot of us, but everyone was really supportive. We were all kind of in the same boat. Some of them, had applied to other programs and didn't get in either, and decided that this was best for them. Some of them were like me, who really needed the flexibility also because they had little kids, and most of us were working and couldn't go to school, full time. So it was really supportive. It was definitely a better fit for me than the traditional program. So I guess it was kind of, a blessing for me that I was able to kind of fall into that other program, thanks to the department head at Cal State East Bay, because I wouldn't have even looked at it.
Did you feel more confident going into the program, or do you feel like you still kind of had a sense of imposter syndrome given your background and coming in as a mom, an older student, or someone who didn't necessarily feel supported doing your post-bacc? How did that affect your initiation or your transition into graduate school? I guess I just wanted to know whether all of the things that you went through, or the identities that you had at the time, and whether those impacted your confidence going into it. So that you applied, you didn't get into one school, you got a great letter of recommendation from the department head, which kind of might have been a boost of confidence, and you got into this other program and it was hybrid. So, it was convenient for you. Like, how did that affect your confidence going into the program? now that you knew what you wanted and you were so determined, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I don't, it's interesting because I don't really feel like, um, the things that had happened before really kind of affected my confidence too much. I felt it as more as like, and I hate to put it this way, it's like another hurdle to get
Mm,
over. It's not like, like there hadn't been hurdles before and it just felt like another one to get over. So I don't really feel like it necessarily affected my confidence because I like I said, I knew I had, really great competitive grades and I knew that I was good at what I had been doing. And so it was them. It wasn't
yeah.
me. It was them. That's the way I felt. Like I said, I used it as fuel. I don't feel like my confidence was really affected by, their concerns. And it's not like I hadn't had to, kind of get over these
Yeah.
things in the past. So yeah, my confidence was fine. As a matter of fact, when I was done with the program, I felt really, with the grad program, I felt really um, prepared. And when I went into my CF year, my CF supervisor told me that I was the strongest CF that she had had in years. And I think part of that was because of the fact that I had already been doing the job for years in the schools, in lots of different schools. Whereas I think a lot of a lot of speech pathologists had their clinical experience in a clinic on campus.
Mhm.
Um, where mine was like, here's a classroom. You don't have anything, there are no materials, there's no room, make it work kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I had already had all of those experiences. So when I finally did go into my CF year, it was like I had already done it. So
Yeah. And where did you do your CF? I guess we can transition into what you were thinking. Where did you apply for your CF?
yeah.
What was your niche, I guess you could say, if you had one at that point?
Yeah. So I knew I always wanted to work for Oakland Unified School District, which is where I work now. I live in Oakland and I knew I wanted to work for the school district. My kids were part of the school district at that point. They're all older now. And so I applied there and that was fine. As you know, there's always a shortage of speech pathologists. There is no, I didn't have any problems with getting a job. I did apply to several other districts just to kind of see what was out there. Um, and Oakland, by far, in terms of pay and benefits and those kinds of things, was the best for my immediate surrounding district. So I did go with Oakland. I'm still in Oakland. Um, my CF year was interesting. I was placed in one of the worst performing schools in the city.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it had some challenges. The staff was very dedicated. The parents were dedicated. But, there was a lot of trauma in the neighborhood and the kids, were experiencing a lot of that trauma. And then, I don't know, kids, when they have these things that they're dealing with and they don't know how to express, these feelings, they don't know how to address them. Then they get to a place where they may feel safe and then they just let go. And so we saw a lot of that. That was hard. That was something that I wasn't prepared for, is to have, a child come into my speech room and when he left, everything was torn off of the walls, and literally just spending like a half an hour just trying to gain, the trust of a kid and to let them know, you can come here and be safe and we can do our work and then you can go back to class. And then if you need to come here again, you can. But that was, it was good. It was good. I've still talked to a lot of those teachers. I'm not at that school anymore. I still talk to a lot of the teachers, the principals. There were two there while I was there. I still talk to them, but some of the kids, I don't see them anymore, and I wonder where they are and how they're doing, and I hope that they're okay. But yeah, that was my CF experience was interesting.
Yeah.
But it was worth it. I don't think I would have wanted to be in any of the other schools in a different setting, because I just felt like I was in the right place at that time. I was where I needed to be.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've seen any different compared to now? Do you feel like there have been any trends in kind of like your caseload or the demographics that have changed over the years, given that you're in the same kind of area geographically?
Yeah. So yes and no. So the way Oakland works is it's unusual to be in one site for more than a few years at a time, only because there's not enough of us, right? So we go where we're needed. But for the past 4 years or 5 years, I'm going to my 5th year at one school that I've been there for 5 years, and the demographics are the same. Predominantly Black and brown students. I think the school that I'm at was maybe 75% African American, but over the past few years, there have been a lot more Asian and Middle Eastern families who've moved into the school. It's still Black and brown, but it's looking a little different. So the school is a commuter school. The neighborhood that the school is in the hills, but most of the families in this particular neighborhood send their kids to private school. And so it's a commuter school in that families from other parts of the city bring their kids in and drop them off and then go to work or whatever they're going to do. So they're not necessarily kids who live in this neighborhood. So the demographics are the same in that most of those kids are coming up from the area of Oakland that's not necessarily as affluent, and so it's the same kids at the school that I used to work at, just in a different neighborhood. So it's nice. The school that I work at now has a moderate severe program. And so most of the kids that I work with right now are moderately to severely disabled, most of them with autism. There's also an inclusion program at the school, which means that there are kids who are in a gen ed classroom, but they would not be able to access the curriculum without having an aide with them most of the day. And so those are the kids that I mostly work with, the inclusion and the severely disabled students. So, and it's good. I love it. I never thought I'd love working with the severely disabled students, but it's been a joy to work with them.
Awesome. Cool. So after we've talked about everything, what are some things that you feel that have impacted you as a Black SLP in this field, whether they be positive or negative?
Positive is that the people that I have met, there's been an amazing amount of support and camaraderie between other SLPs who are Black and brown in my community. When I first came to Oakland, I was told that I was the first Black SLP who had been hired for the district in like 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And there were 3 or 4 SLPs there, and they really kind of pulled me in, and I think and we still really help each other, and I see that in other schools and other SLPs that I've had an opportunity to talk with. It's just that how much we are able to and willing to support each other has been great. I think that we do need to work a little harder on making sure that there are more of us. And I'm not sure how to do that, but yeah.
What would you, aside from that one point, are there other things that you would like to see changed in the field, aside from the representation and the amount of SLPs of color that we have currently?
what would I like to see changed in the field? Besides, I feel like that the lack of representation is the biggest issue that we have. I also feel like, sometimes we're not necessarily taken seriously, and not the way we should be, and that needs to change. Um, and again, and I don't know how, I feel like we as SLPs are doing well in representing ourselves. I think maybe if we had our own union, I don't know how easy that would be to kind of have a national union or something like that for, yeah, yay, unions. Um, Pathologist, I really feel like we need to work to have our profession taken more seriously. We teach people communication, and that's extremely important, but also those of us who work with memory and swallowing, and those are very like important things that people need, and we need to. I just wish people would take us more seriously than they do. And at the same time, I wish people would, for those of us who work in the schools, we're not teachers. We're not teachers. And, for those who work in skilled nursing facilities and hospitals, we're not nurses. We have our expertise, and I would like people to kind of, notice that and recognize that, and kind of treat us, accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So I know I talked a lot, and I hope I answered all of your questions.
No, you did. You were
Okay,
great.
Good.
This was great.
Okay, good.
I think this is kind of the perfect segue to kind of talk about, we want to hear about how you stay passionate in this field. So obviously you've been working for 8 years. It sounds like you've overcome a lot of hurdles, just even in your pathway to get to becoming a speech pathologist. And the field itself isn't an easy one, even when you're in it. Just having to juggle the day-to-day caseload and things like that. So how do you stay passionate, and what kind of helps you refill your cup when times are rough?
Yeah. That's a good question. I on a personal level, I read when I feel like I need to not, just kind of get away and recharge. I read. But, there are times where I'm at work and I'm like, I have this to do, and I have that to do, and this and that. And then, a kid will come up to me and give me a hug, or a kid who has not been able to produce a sound all of a sudden is able to produce it. Those are there's just all of these tiny little itty bitty things that kind of are like little drops in the bucket, so it's never really empty. I have all these little drops. And then when I do feel like it's getting low, then, I do take a step back and do things for myself. And I also learned to just say no. I learned to say no, right? It's important. Skill. And then that way I feel like I don't necessarily, really need to recharge as much if I'm able to just say no, I can't do that. But, yeah, I think mostly just, being with the kids and knowing that I'm making a difference in their life in whatever little or, way possible. It's been, that really kind of helps me get through, the day with the caseloads and the meetings and the therapy. I wish I could. I always say, if I had to do it again, I'd be an SLPA because then I could spend all of my time with the kids. But no, seriously, I do. I love being an SLP. I think that I would not want to be in any other field right now.
I loved what you said about kind of having all of those moments of little drops in your bucket, so that your bucket really is never empty to the point where it needs a complete refill. Yeah. That's so great.
Yeah.
If you could kind of give some advice or encouragement or explanations to your younger self or somebody who is kind of embarking on being an SLP and like starting that journey for themselves, what would it be?
Yeah, I thought about this a lot, and I just really kind of just be kind to yourself, work hard because, I mean, you've all been through grad school and there are times when it can be intense, but work hard, but also, like be really, really kind to yourself first. And even when you're going into your CF year, if you are not kind to yourself and you are burning yourself out and you're trying to do all of these things that you feel like are expected of you, right? They're not necessarily things that, so other people are asking you to do. You have these self-imposed expectations. And those are, it's not bad to have those because those are, they kind of push us forward. But if they're causing you stress or anxiety, then, it's time, step back and, realize like, is do I really need to have, all of these, like one lesson set up that's going to work for everybody. I know I'm not saying it the right way, but I guess you kind of understand what I mean. Just don't stress yourself out. Be kind to yourself and know that you're making a difference. So.
What do you kind of have in store for your own future as an SLP?
Yeah. Okay. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I really, and this is, I really want to go into private practice, and I have been on the fence for years, for years and years and years, to the point where I have literally turned people down who have come to me and asked me to do, to work with their kids, and I keep saying, why haven't I just made this leap? And so, I am moving further and further over, to the other side of the fence. For me, my next step is to find a mentor for myself. Even though I've been doing this for 8 years, I do realize I still need a mentor and I might still need one in 20 years, who knows? And so that is where I'm going. So the next step for me right now is to find a mentor, and also I would like to continue to be a mentor to other people. So those are my 2 or 3 goals that I have. My immediate goals is to mentor someone, to find a mentor, and move towards a private practice.
It's so incredible. What kind of, what would your private practice kind of look like?
You mean in terms of caseload, or?
Yeah.
I do a lot of work with kids on the autism spectrum. So I would probably continue to do that. Right now, maybe 30% of my caseload are nonverbal students. And so I do a lot of AAC work. And so I will continue with that. Right now, I'm in a program to become a certified AAC AT specialist. And I got that idea from another SLP of color. Karina, who just moved on to a doctorate program, which is amazing. I'm so proud of her. That's probably the demographics that I would look for, is working with kids who are probably mostly nonverbal, but yeah.
So awesome. They need a lot of advocacy for them. So I think it's such an amazing area to go down.
Yes, I agree.
So you were talking about your caseload and how a majority of your students are between moderate to severely disabled. Can you share a little bit of how your experience has been in the pandemic? And I know that you said you bought your mic for teletherapy.
Yeah. It's been difficult with the kids who are moderate to severely disabled. And I would say most of them are severely disabled. Their parents really need to be involved with therapy. And my experience has been that, a lot of the parents are just, they have been not able necessarily to work with the kids because they are they either need support with technology or they don't have access to technology. And so, so it's steep learning curve. I definitely can't do it without, I can't do therapy without having some support from caregivers. So, which makes things a little more challenging for everyone. But we made it work.
What does that look like for the fall? Do you know yet from your school district?
We're still working on it. I do know that the first 4 weeks of school will be teletherapy, and I did get an email from, or our district sent out an email to the community saying that they wanted to have schools. They want to have schools kind of come back in phases. So the first phase is distance learning, and then slowly moving back to in-person learning based on criteria that needs to be met, put out from the public health department. And so, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like when we go back. I do know that our district purchased specialized equipment for speech therapists. I have no idea what that is. I don't know what it is. But I think it's probably some kind of plexiglass barrier or something like that. Which is going to be really, I don't know how I'm going to have to give it a lot of thought. I don't know how I'm going to model, device usage when I can't touch, the device because we're working through plexiglass.
Yeah.
Figure it
I
out.
need to think about that.
Yeah, there's lots to think about, but I have time. I have 4 weeks to figure it out.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. It's honestly so powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, it was nice to talk to somebody about it. My husband never wanted to hear it. He never wanted to hear it. So it's good. Yeah.
Lucretia, thank you so much for your advice and your words of encouragement. I feel like in the last few months, given the pandemic, Black Lives Matter, so many lives have been put into jeopardy.
Yeah.
And I think for SLPs of color and students of color looking to join the field, suddenly everyone is more vocal about what their experiences have been, and they want to find ways to be advocates. And so I think it's important for everyone to kind of learn what they want out of the field and what they want to contribute. But then also trying to understand that the systems that are in place don't always support these students. So we put so much pressure on ourselves to be advocates, but when we also don't have a place where there is encouragement, then where is that cushion for us? Because then it puts that burden, that pressure all on us to just be advocates. And I know that and I know something that I noticed just online is that everyone's talking about, it's so important for us to have task force and to have these teams established. And then I remember reading something online where someone commented saying as important as these movements are, it's only making so much of a difference. It's more of like a damage control. And that made me to kind of start thinking, what does that mean that it's only damage control? And how can I contribute but still feel like I'm not spreading myself thin for making change? And why does it have to only be on students of color or clinicians of color to be part of that change? And then it comes all the way. So there's so many layers and factors behind it. And I'm questioning where do we start?
Yeah. It's so complicated, and honestly, I'm having the same kind of questions and thoughts, for me, like I said, I'm probably old enough to be your mother, so I don't know, but I feel like It's important to remember that you just have to, like, we do need to pick up, this kind of load and work with it and carry it for a little while, but then also just remember, to put it down and let somebody else carry it for a little bit. And it is important that we have others, like, and I hate to use the word others, but different groups of SLPs kind of support us, because we're such a small, percentage of our field that we can't make these changes on our own. And we do need to push, others to kind of support us. But, I do understand what, you're saying about not, like, being pulled too thin. And so I hope that you don't become jaded, number one, because it's easy to do. And I find myself falling into that same kind of trap. And then I listen to, like, you guys, and I feel better. um, yeah, just, the work needs to be done, but not to the detriment of your mental health or physical well-being. So, I don't know if that addresses, necessarily what you were saying, but you're not doing it alone. You don't have to do it alone. So, yeah. So, but for now, just focus on your career, right? Focus on your career, because you guys are, it's new, and things should be, it's exciting, and don't go too hard on the advocacy part. Just, definitely do it, but for now,
finding that balance.
Learn what you can, during your CF, and know that there's, plenty of opportunity to also, to kind of, you don't have to, like, put 100% into, because I do see a lot of people kind of burning out, really quickly. Yeah. And I just, there is an urgent need, but where you don't have to do it all on your own.
I think it's such a lifelong thing that, you're not just advocating to reach some sort of end goal. Like, it's really going to be for the rest of your life. So that's an important reminder that you can't burn out too quick, because you're going to have to keep doing this.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there will be a huge jump. I mean, I've seen a huge, jump in our kind of forward movement in things just over the past 6 months. When I compare it to, like, the past 8 years for me, it's been great. So it's refreshing to see everyone working, for this this kind of movement to kind of push these things along. So it's good.
So kind of just wrapping up the interview, do you have any last words or experiences that you'd like to share with us and our audience?
Let's see. Enjoy being a CF and take care of yourselves. Learn how to say no. Leave work at home. At work, don't take a lot of work home with you. Make sure you have make sure you stay in touch with the people that you're meeting now, because they will really be the ones that'll help you throughout, your career, especially thinking in your CF year, the people that the support system that you kind of build will be your support system throughout your career, and you can always go back to them. So, I guess that's it.
Well, thank you so much, Lucretia, for coming on to our podcast, and hopefully we can get this running and continue on with it. But we really appreciate you putting the time into talking with us and sharing all of your experiences, because I think what you've shared is very valuable. And your individual experience and journey onto speech pathology is unique, because everyone, I don't want to say everyone, I think that's just a very broad generalization, but a lot of students that I know that are in the program are practicing clinicians, they had someone in their childhood who had speech therapy, or they personally had speech therapy, so they were familiar with the field. And so they, like you mentioned before, it's you transition on knowing that you want to be a speech language pathologist. But I want to let others know that are listening and part of this community that you can still pursue it as a second job, third job, whatever it may be, as a part of a career. And I hope that they can listen to your experiences and find encouragement and support behind what you've shared.
Yeah, me too. I hope they can too. Yeah. Okay, well, it was really nice meeting you all. You guys did an amazing job with this interview.
We would like to thank Lucretia for joining us on the SLPs of Color podcast. If you don't already follow us, you can find us on Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts at the handle SLPs of Color. Please make sure to follow, subscribe, give us a rating, and leave us a review so that others can find us. You can also leave us a voice message with feedback for this episode at 510-255-5620. Thank you.